Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much for our panel. I'm sorry that this is one of those days we have two hearings going on at the exact same time, but we appreciate you being here and joining us. And if I could just go back to Mr. Smitherin, if I could just ask you a few questions. I found your testimony very interesting that you had given. You say on page 1, you say, however, because the federal government and the EPA continue to set unreasonable roadblocks to diverse fuel production, the natural gas industry is challenged to supply enough energy for the nation. And then you go on to state that the EPA has implemented such onerous restrictions on the ability to build new coal plants that it has greatly impacted fuel supply in Texas and the nation. You know, when we were talking about these onerous restrictions, I'm just curious, have you heard of any of the EPA doing any cost basis analysis for the state of Texas, how it would affect you all?
Congressman, I'm not aware of any analysis they've done with regard to the state of Texas, though when they put forward many of these regulations, they proffer certain cost-benefit analysis, and not surprisingly, the benefits in their minds always outweigh the cost. What we have challenged is, what is the cost of failed reliability? What is the cost of not having enough electricity, of the lights going out? And that is a real possibility if we prematurely close down some of our coal-fired power generation plants, or we limit the ability to recover natural gas. Either of those could lead to shortages.
Well, and when we're talking about looking at those issues, and especially when you're talking about coal-fired plants, especially where I'm from, the state of Ohio, that up in the northern part of the state, we're well over 60% coal-fired, and you know, we're for, as Republicans had said back in 2008, we all want to have an all-of-the-above energy policy that takes in, you know, clean coal, natural gas, nuclear, hydro, and all of the alternatives. But we want to make sure that they're out there for the people, because in a question like what could be going on here, especially when they're not doing a cost basis analysis and we're not really sure how the impact is, you know, really in the end, when you're starting to close down these plants, you know, who's going to pay for this in the very end?
Well, in regulated markets, if you're retrofitting these coal plants to come into compliance with everything except carbon capture, which is another technology altogether, then the ratepayers are going to pay for them. If you're talking about in deregulated or competitive markets, then you're going to see many of these plants close down, which is going to end up giving us a fuel mix which is heavily weighted toward natural gas, which is great if natural gas prices stay low and the supply remains high.
Well, and again, you know, in the state of Ohio, we've been very fortunate that with the Utica Shale being found, and it's actually some geological surveys have been done recently, they're actually moving farther across the state, which, you know, it's great, but you're right, we have to have that blend out there. And the thing that I worry about is that, like my district, I have 60,000 manufacturing jobs, and we have to have baseload capacity to make sure that when the big machines go on in the morning or at night, that they stay on, and we want to make sure that folks can compete out there. Mr. Mueller, if I could just move over to ask you, you know, you're talking about some things up in the Northeast, but what about in the Midwest when you look at, you know, when you're looking at heating and taking precedence over electric generation, should the two compete for natural resources? What do you see about the Midwest and how things could be impacted?
So we've got a very complicated situation in that 21 different interstate pipelines serve the Midwest region. Each one of those pipelines has a different set of fact circumstances in terms of how constrained they are, but all of them were constructed on a subscription basis around residential heat load. So we continue to be concerned that as we begin to rely more on gas, more in the winter months, we will see conflicts around competition for that gas pipeline capacity. We're trying to understand what that conflict might look like across those 21 gas pipes to see what the cost to consumers might be.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.